I want to welcome you all to Unity Monroe this Sunday morning. For those of you who are watching, whenever you're watching our Unity of Monroe YouTube channel, thank you for tuning in. We appreciate you. And as I began this service this morning, I said to those who were here, you are loved. I hope you know you are loved and appreciated. And I hope those of you who are viewing this know that you are loved and very much appreciated. And thank you for tuning in and for being a part of this. Let me ask you a question. Have you heard the one about the man who was walking along the beach and he found a magic lamp? So what do you do when you find a magic lamp? You're walking along the beach. He picked it up and he began to rub it, and what happened? A genie appeared. And the genie said, "Because you have freed me, I shall grant you one wish." Well, the man thought about it for a moment, like you would, like we all would. He thought about it. He said, here's my wish. I would wish that my brother and I would reconcile. We had a falling out 20 years ago. We had a fight, and he hasn't forgiven me. I wish we could be reconciled somehow. Just then, there was this giant thunderclap, and the genie said, "Your wish has been granted." So he knew that right then the wish was granted. And the genie then continued and said, "Now I want to ask you a question. Most people would ask for fame or riches or something like that. But you asked for this reconciliation between you and your brother, which is noble. But let me ask you this question. Is it because you are dying?" And the man said, "Oh no, surely that's not it. But unfortunately my brother is dying, and he's worth about $60 million.
Oh, gosh.
Now, that's certainly one way, is it not, to honor forgiveness, to reconcile, if you will, to each his or her own, right? When it comes to forgiveness. But today, Carol and I are beginning this 4-part Summer Sunday series entitled Embrace Forgiveness. Embrace forgiveness, and we're going to look at all aspects of forgiveness, whether it's forgiveness of ourselves or forgiving Spirit or God, or forgiving a situation we're in, especially forgiving others, forgiving our world. All of this goes into this kind of expression of what it means to embrace this thing of forgiveness. Now, down through the years, Carol knows this, Marianne and some others as well, knowing that, we do a Summer Sunday series every year. We do a spring and a fall series 3 or 4 times a year. And I like to do these series, whether it was something like a metaphysical Bible study series, or whether we did something on looking at the 23rd Psalm, or the Summer Survival Guide for the Soul. That was a good one. I like that one. Questions on the Quest. There was one on Points of Peace and Spiritual Keys for Aging Well. All of those were good summer and fall series that we did. My favorite one that we did over the years, a long time ago, was one on 4 weeks of messages and words and lessons and teachings of Jesus. And it was entitled, "Jesus Said What?" Because sometimes we think, oh, surely Jesus said that, but maybe he did, maybe he didn't. So welcome to this experience of what it means to live in that full embrace of forgiveness, to recognize that when it comes to forgiving, oftentimes we're holding on to things that are part of our past. We hold on to a history. It's often historical, if you know what I mean. It's like the woman that was complaining to her friend saying, every time my husband and I have an argument, he gets historical. And she said, "Don't you mean hysterical?" She said, "No. He brings up the past. He's historical." And so when it comes to embracing forgiveness, my friends, as you know, forgiveness is something that happened to us, or we thought, or we did not do, or someone did to us, or the world. And we sometimes get, in our human condition situation, historical. Embracing forgiveness is about letting that go, recognizing the power and the presence of forgiveness, what it means to us. How do we understand this in a more rich tone? Do we need to even embrace forgiveness if thinking everything in our world is going right, everything in our own personal lives is going right? Unity's co-founder Charles Fillmore often talked about every night his process would be before going to bed. His prayer would be simply to focus in on that day, to focus in on what he had done or not done. And was there a moment where he needed to ask for forgiveness for himself, for that disconnect maybe he had with himself and God or someone else? So you think about that when it comes to, oh gosh, my life is great and grand, but I think there's still something that's the call to say, what is this in my life, this progress, this day? And did it go as swimmingly as I wanted it to go? To embrace forgiveness, to call on that power and presence of forgiveness, is to recognize that we can not only embrace it, but we come to recognize our connection, our unity with God. And we forgive ourselves if that sense of disconnect and not expressing our divinity is a full, rich thing. Or in relationships, because who amongst us has not had a challenge, a difficulty, an experience where there's a disunity in our relationship? And so we find within ourselves a healing opportunity to hope to get to a depth of meaning of what forgiveness truly can mean. In the Aramaic, in the tradition of Jesus' language in Aramaic, forgiveness simply meant to cancel, untie, or to let loose. Now, I love that idea, to cancel, to untie something, to let it loose. What am I letting loose? I'm letting loose that sense of pain and suffering, that sense of separation from somebody, that sense of non-unity of all creation, of all life. That's the language that we're asking when it comes to embracing forgiveness. Now, I chose this title, Embrace Forgiveness, because I think it's important. First of all, forgiveness, I think, is one of the most important spiritual steps we can take. But also, it's recognizing what that word embrace means, as I shared a little bit earlier. To embrace something, to bring it into your life, to be open to it, to give it energy or love. As my grandmother down south used to say, to give it some sugar. Or to receive some sugar from that sense of forgiveness. Did I say that? Sure, I did. But to recognize as well that it's part of this attitudinal adjustment that we must take on. Yeah, words and actions are good when it comes to using the power of forgiveness, but really it's about what's my attitude toward this situation, this person, this experience. It's really getting into what I want to say is very symbolic in our lives. There's a lot of symbolism and metaphors when it comes to stories about forgiveness. One of the greatest ones is one that you probably grew up with as a kid, or as an adult. And that is simply the metaphor, the story, if you will, about kissing a frog. We think, that's just a story about a princess that kisses this frog and he becomes this great prince. It's a metaphor, my friends. It's symbolic of something. To think about those frog-like qualities we have in our consciousness, in our heart, where we're separate from somebody else. We have to embrace, we have to kiss, we have to love that part of ourselves that we don't necessarily like or that we think is that unforgiving part of us. So we have to kiss a lot of frogs. Now, this is not a spiritual, unfoldment or a spiritual way of doing things, a discipline, if you will. It is simply recognizing that this is a story, it's a metaphor, it stands for something. Can I embrace and forgive myself? Can I embrace and forgive somebody else when I slighted them? Can I embrace forgiveness when it comes to what others have done unto me? It's all part of that grand process we call embracing forgiveness, embracing it all. Dr. Rachel Naomi Remen says in her book, Kitchen Table Wisdom, this idea, but how can I let it all go? How can I do the process of forgiveness? How can I stop remembering? In the human condition, we have these wonderful memories, and there's nothing wrong with that. And again, this is part of the historical nature of our thoughts. We hold on to that history. How can I stop the remembering? Some people have said to me, if my heart were open, I could forgive. But she goes on to say in that book, but I think it's the other way around. Forgiveness is a choice. Forgive first, and then your heart can open. So how do I stand here? How do you stand here in this wonderful humanness, the divine being that you are, so that you can embrace this idea of standing first and saying, I forgive. I'm going to let my heart open. I'm going to let my mind be embracing in unity with all of creation. She gets to this idea of recognizing that there's more to forgiveness than just this simple declaration or an affirmation. It is an attitudinal healing that takes place, an attitudinal adjustment, an attitudinal idea. I love that thought, that forgiveness is a choice, but first you must forgive. So then your heart can be healed, to be open, to be ready. I don't know if you've ever saw a movie. I think we actually featured it here many years ago in our Wednesday evening spiritual movie night. But it was a movie about forgiveness. It was called The Straight Story. I don't know if you ever saw the movie, but it's a wonderful story. It's based on a true story. It's about an older man who had this division between him and his brother. Seems to be a current theme here today about this separation of brothers and others. But it's a story about this separation between the two brothers. And they hadn't seen each other and talked to each other for 20-some years or something to that effect. And he heard that his brother had a stroke. And so he wanted to reconcile. He wanted to find some sort of healing moment. And he wanted to visit his brother, but his brother lived in another state. And he, in his own health condition, wanted to go visit his brother. But how was he going to do this? You see, his name was Alvin Straight, thus the Straight Story. And he did not even own a car. No buses went from where he lived to where his brother lived. And he wasn't willing to let somebody drive him because, as he said, I have to do this on my own. You understand what he's saying with that? I think we can relate to that. I have to do this on my own. He had to find a way, this was part of it, to get to visit his brother. What did he have? Well, he had a riding mower. And so he set out, even in his ill health, he set out from western Iowa to go to Wisconsin on a riding lawnmower. And he made it there, and he saw his brother. And as they were sitting there on the porch, very few words were shared. But that wasn't the important thing. The important thing was this connection. The important thing was his journey. You see, it was the journey of reconciliation. It was the journey to forgiveness. It was the journey of him embracing forgiveness that really was the true depth of what it meant to be connected, to be in oneness with each other. So this wonderful story, if you will, the Straight Story, tells us about something that is in our heart too, that there's no separation. There's no sense of, oh, I'm too far away. There's no sense of, oh, how will I get there? Whether we're talking about an actual physical thing of getting into a car, or if you happen to have a riding lawnmower, it's really about attitudinal healing, adjustments, heart-centered spaces, if you will. So the distance really wasn't about, from Iowa to Wisconsin. It was about heart to heart, that little space, that little place from heart to heart. These wonderful stories like this and others, maybe you're familiar with some of them over the years, and you think about them. You think about the power of forgiveness. Sometimes we have to kiss a few frogs, yes, symbolically. The parts of us that have been unhealed, what am I holding on to? What am I keeping in my heart? What am I separating myself from? When we look at Scripture, when we look at all the sacred scriptures around the world, we find this very similar message. Maybe you've studied some of those, whether it's words from the East or words from our Bible, the Old Testament or the New Testament. We find a lot of emphasis on forgiveness. Those of you who grew up in a tradition of knowing your prayers, you knew or you probably learned or you probably were taught the Lord's Prayer. Whether it was a tradition from Protestantism or Catholicism, we all learned that Lord's Prayer. And what is one of the best lines of this teaching that Jesus taught, according to the tradition? Forgive us our debts as we also have forgiven our debtors. Or in other traditions, trespasses as we've forgiven those who have done what? Trespassed against us. And no matter what the tradition, we find something very powerful in that. This is more than a teaching. This is more than a prayer that you were told to commit to a rote process of learning it and repeating it over and over again. It was a tradition of teaching where you were to analyze and break it down, each step, each part of this Lord's Prayer, so that each part of that is applied to our own individual lives, consciousness. For this one in particular, to forgive us our debts, you think it's more than about money. It's not about money. What debts am I holding out? What trespasses am I holding on to? Maybe it's a trespass against somebody that cut you off coming up here to church on Sunday. Or maybe it was a trespass of something that happened 2 weeks ago or 3 years ago or throughout the lifetime that you've lived. To forgive our debts, our trespasses, as we forgive those who have done those to us, is one of the most healing things, because it is an attitudinal adjustment, my friends. So it's more than the words. It's more than just an action. It is embracing. Again, that word embracing means hold on to it. Take it on. Envelop it. Love it. All of that's part of that process. In these words, Jesus tells us of something. He's talking about the law of mind, the law of heart, the law that says simply that for these things to dissolve in our lives, for us to have that next step forward, we have to do what? I have to let go of that which keeps me from my highest and best. If I held something against you, oh, you did something terrible to me, Jen. How dare Carol? If I held something like that against you, what are the chances of me growing and maturing in spiritual understanding and wisdom? It's challenging. It's hard enough to do that in many respects. But when I hold on to enmity or pain or suffering, what am I holding on to? Well, the old proverbial adage is, the old proverb is, you're holding on to that big old burning lump of coal, expecting that somehow if you hold on to that and you throw it at somebody, you're going to hurt them. And all we're doing is what? Burning ourselves. So we know how that works. So we invite ourselves to understand that. This wonderful Lord's Prayer, this wonderful phrase, this passage, these verses here about forgiveness, I think can be incorporated into our time of quiet and meditation. I've done this many times over the years where I incorporate this into the process of just being quiet, taking a moment to breathe and center myself. So I begin just simply by breathing in, saying, forgive me my debts, errors, sins, trespasses, shortcomings. You get what I'm saying with that? You breathe that in, and then you breathe out, and you say, as I forgive those who debt, error, sin, trespass against me. And we modify this in whatever way we wish. To breathe in this moment. And you simply say those words, I forgive. And as you breathe out, you send that energy out into the world. Breathing out, I forgive those who have done that to me, if I'm holding on to that. So throughout these 4 weeks, I'm going to invite you to maybe use this particular passage of breathing in, breathing out, forgiving my debts, forgiving those who have trespassed against me, to recognize as well that it is letting the transforming voice of Spirit of God to move us, to transform us from that which was into that which is right now and that which shall be. Because that's all that it is about when it comes to embracing forgiveness. It is a step beyond where we are right now that holds us back, that keeps us from our highest and best. And to me, forgiveness, the embracing of forgiveness, is the most noble thing that one can do, where we say, I love you and I appreciate you, and I let you go because simply you are and I am as God created us to be. So let us embrace forgiveness as we embrace who we are and what we bring to this life. So I'm going to invite you now to just take a moment to sit back and relax, and let's join together in this sense of embracing of forgiveness. And as you get comfortable where you are seated, as you close your eyes, and as you open your soul, your whole being to this moment, in the wisdom and in the light of God, as you breathe in this moment, and let it go. Simply take this opportunity to bless and to honor your whole being, this body, this mind, this expression of who you are. To recognize in this step of quiet, of contemplation, there is peace and there is a soul serenity, breathing in and breathing out once again. I honor this step and phase of consciousness loving presence for the forgiving power, the forgiving attitude, the forgiving ideas and healing are all part of those dynamic choices I am making when I am confronted or see or feel that sense of separation or unforgiveness. I simply take those moments to pause, to invite an attitudinal adjustment, and to recognize as I forgive my own sense of disunity or separation, I forgive others who have trespassed or are indebted. In those moments of upliftment, of consciousness, as I let go, I allow Spirit, I allow God to transform how I feel and think and observe. I invite and welcome, embrace forgiveness. It is a healing opportunity, an attitudinal moment. As I breathe in forgiveness, as I breathe out forgiveness and understanding. I evoke in this moment that condition or person or situation no longer has control or power in my life. And so there is not just an attitudinal awareness, but an attitudinal healing, a harmony. Forgive us our debts as we forgive those debts that we feel have come into our life. I invite myself in this moment to sit in the wisdom and the holiness of the heart, for in God there is an infinite possibilities of bringing forth this change of attitude, this forgiveness. I embrace forgiveness. I embrace the power of light and love. I embrace wholeness. For truly I welcome the power of forgiveness in this moment and in this space and in this silence. I embrace forgiveness. I welcome that possibility. I encourage it. I love it. I embrace it. And I make that declaration in my heart and mind in this moment. That throughout this week, I will be attentive to the embrace of forgiveness in any way, shape, or form, for it is truly an attitudinal healing moment. And so I am grateful for that. Thank you, loving Spirit. May that awareness be ever in my heart and soul. Amen.